Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. I am Hafiza Hadi Irfan here, lecturer of English from University of Education, Lahore. I'm gonna teach you a play from the course titled Comedy of Manners. The topic of our discussion today is again on Pygmalion Act 2, but we will discuss this act today with reference to its characters, themes, and symbols. Because in the previous lecture we have seen in detail that what happened in this act. But before going towards the characters and all these things that are going to be discussed in this lecture, let me tell you briefly that what happened up till now in the play. As we have come to know that two gentlemen meet in the rain one night at Covent Garden. The one is Professor Higgins, who is a scientist, uh, of phonetics, and Colonial Pickering, who is a linguist of Indian dialects. And the first bets the other that he can, with the help of his knowledge, can transform Eliza, who is a flower girl. He has the ability that with the help of his knowledge, he can transform that girl into a well-spoken um, lady or into a well-spoken duchess, you may say. The next morning, the girl appears at his laboratory, offering to pay a shilling so that she may speak properly enough to work in a flower shop. Because she wants to work in a flower shop rather than selling flowers in the street corners. Higgins makes merciless fun of her, but is then seduced by the idea of working his magic on her. Pickering guards him on by agreeing to cover the cost of the experiment if Higgins can pass off Eliza as a duchess at an ambassador's garden party. This challenge was taken. And Higgins starts by having his housekeeper bath Eliza and give her new clothes. Then Eliza's father, Alfred Doolittle, comes to demand the return of his daughter. Though his real intention was to hit Higgins up for some money, nothing else. Then the professor, amused by Doolittle's unusual rhetoric, he gives him £5. Although he was actually giving him £10, he was willing to give him £10, but Doolittle said that he just want £5, and Higgins gave him £5 then. And on his way out, the dustman, Alfred Doolittle, fails to recognize the now clean, pretty flower girl as his own daughter. He was unable to recognize her own daughter, Eliza, because to some extent we can say that apparently she's been transformed. We may say that she's been transformed physically. So this was Act 2. Basically, now we will move towards the characters of Act 2. So moving towards our major topic, we will discuss the characters which have appeared in Act 2, and the names of those characters are Eliza Doolittle, or you may say Liza Doolittle. She is a flower girl, and you see her in the previous act that she was selling flowers in the street corners. And then comes the character of Henry Higgins, who is a professor of phonetics, and then comes Colonel Pickering. He is a linguist of Indian dialects, and but this in this act we see him just as a friend of Henry Higgins at his house. at Henry Higgins' house. Then comes Alfred Doolittle. Alfred Doolittle is the father of Eliza Doolittle. And then comes the character of Mrs. Peirce, who is a housekeeper in Henry Higgins' house. So these are the five characters that have appeared in Act 2, and we will discuss only these characters in this lecture. Now we are going to discuss the characters that we have found in Act 2. So the first character that we will discuss is of Eliza Doolittle, or you may say Liza Doolittle. And as you know that she is a flower girl, and she sells flowers in the street corners. In this act, she appears as a common girl with a dreadful accent, and she wants to learn how to talk more genteel so that she can get a job in a nice flower shop, because she does not want to sell flowers in the street corners. She wants to get a job in a nice flower shop. That's why he has come over here to Higgins to improve his language. She hopes that by learning to speak differently, she can change her life and her identity as well. She can find a better job and move up the social ladder. And then we see that in this act that she is treated so bad by Higgins, who just who takes her just as an object for his experiment, not as a human being. Here, Eliza Doolittle um, is found to Higgins as Galatea, whom he will carve and mold into a great duchess. The next character that appears in Act 2 is Henry Higgins, who is a professor of phonetics, as we know that. This act shows Higgins as an incorrigible scientist. He is not only violently interested in everything that can be studied as a scientific subject, but he is actually interested in humans only as subject of his scientific study. He just sees human beings as his subject of study, or the subject or object of his experiment also. He does not consider them human beings. And so he treats them the same way. For that reason, when quite a common girl, Eliza Doolittle, comes at his door, Higgins thinks it is a lucky happenstance that will allow him to show Pickering the way he works. But when he comes to know that it is Eliza, he chases her away. For having learned all he can learn about her accent, he cannot see how she can be of any more use to him. Later, his mind seizes upon her as being no use to anybody but me. Later on, when he gets agree that he can teach Eliza, um, then he thinks that he he can no use to anybody but me. He can be of no use to anybody but me. He sees her not as a human being, but as a bit of baggage only. And not only this, when Alfred Doolittle, who is the father of Eliza Doolittle, comes, Higgins is very much eager to listen to this new accent. He displays such an exaggerated focus on his work that it becomes so hard to tell if Shaw wants to make fun of this character or put it on a pedestal. We just become so confused. His Henry Higgins not at all cared about others' feelings. We have come to know in this act that he is not cared about other people's feelings. Even Mrs. Peirce chides him for treating people like objects, and she says, Well, the matter is, sir, that you can't make a girl up like that as if you were picking up a pebble on the beach. She says this statement to Henry Higgins. Here, Henry Higgins, the curator, is symbolizing Pygmalion, who has found his stone Galatea in the person of Eliza, whom he is just treating as a subject or as an object of his experiment, and whom he will carve and mold into a great duchess, someone whom he can control and command. And we see in this act that from the very beginning he is just commanding her, and he is just trying to control Eliza. In this act, Higgins is revealed to be somewhat of a misogynist as well, who thinks that women ruin everything. This partially explains his rudeness towards Eliza, because we see throughout in this act that he treats so bad Eliza. So we can see that he is somewhat a misogynist. So this was the character of Henry Higgins with reference to Act 2. Let's see the character of Colonel Pickering. As you know that in the previous act that he is a linguist of Indian dialects, but in this act we just see Pickering as a friend of Higgins, who has joined him at his home. Colonel Pickering is more tender as compared to Higgins. And in this act, in objecting to Higgins, Pickering calls Eliza Miss Doolittle. When when Higgins Higgins was treating so bad Eliza, and he was so rude towards Eliza, Pickering calls Eliza Miss Doolittle, which is a convention usually reserved for high-class ladies. Although Eliza does not belong to upper class, she belongs to lower class, but still Pickering calls this Miss Doolittle for Eliza. It seems almost as if Higgins' extreme rudeness in treating Eliza like a non-person, almost like a pet, pushes Pickering unconsciously to admit that Eliza is a person, and in being so has an ability by calling her by the address of a lady. Even at one point, he reminds Higgins that the girl might have some sensitive feelings despite her gutter snipe exterior, because Higgins used to call her gutter snipe and all. So here he tries to remind Higgins that the girl might have sensitive feelings, so he should not go so far and all. Then we will see the character Alfred Doolittle. Alfred Doolittle is a father is a father of Doolittle is a father of Eliza Doolittle, and in this act we see this character so mean. When Mrs. Peirce takes Eliza away, we are hardly prepared for the immediate appearance of her father, of Eliza's father. The audience and Higgins alike, we just expect Alfred Doolittle as an irate father who is very much anxious over the safety of his youthful daughter. We expect him to demand honorable protection for his offspring. But Alfred Doolittle is just the opposite of whatever the audience and we were thinking. He was so mean, and he just come to get some money from Higgins at the altar of his daughter's stay with him. So this reveals that how mean this character is. Then comes the character of Mrs. Peirce. As we know that Mrs. Peirce is Higgins' housekeeper. Um, she is Higgins' housekeeper for a long time, and we see her consistently speaking about Higgins' character and his habits in this act. She has been lecturing Higgins on manners and etiquette. And she says that if Eliza is to be in the house, Higgins must watch his language, stop appearing in house robes, cease wiping his hands on his clothes, refrain from cursing, and begin performing other acts of proper manners. Because although she is not very much educated, because she is a housekeeper, but still she is lecturing Higgins that how to behave in a well manner, because before Eliza, because whatever Higgins is going to do, Eliza will pick them up, and she will do the same. And because Higgins is going to mold Eliza from a gutter snipe, or from a lower class lady, from a duchess, from a lower class lady to a duchess. So good manners are very important to learn for her. So she just chides Higgins and say him to behave in a good way in the presence of Eliza. And unlike Higgins, her behavior with Eliza is good, and she sees her just as a human being, regardless of whatever her class and social status is. Even she chides Higgins for treating people like objects by saying that you can't take up a girl like that as if you were picking up a pebble on the beach. She says her. So all these things shows that she is a very kind lady. And now we have discussed five characters which appeared in Act 2. Mrs. Peirce, Alfred Doolittle, Pickering, Higgins, and Eliza. So these were the five characters, and we are done with them. Now we will discuss some of the themes which appeared in Act 2. The first theme that we will see is the theme of language and speech. In Act 2, we see that Higgins has the knowledge of language and speech. That's why Eliza Doolittle has come over here to get lessons on language and speech to improve her language and to improve her life as well. And later on, we see that when Alfred Doolittle when he comes, Higgins is able to recognize um, his identity just with his knowledge of language and speech, just with the help of his knowledge of phonetics. In this act, it is also revealed that language has power. Eliza's transformation is encouraged simply by Pickering calling her by the name Miss Doolittle. While Higgins insults Eliza, which severely hurts her feelings, shows the potential violence of language. When Pickering calls Eliza Miss Doolittle, it encourages Eliza, while Higgins use language, and he just insults Eliza with the help of language, and this shows the potential violence of language. So this was the theme, language and speech. The next theme is language and identity. This Act 2 is most interested in the connections between a person's speech and his or her identity. As we see that Higgins can easily guess where people are from just on the basis of their accents and dialects, and by the use of particular slangs. For example, when Alfred Doolittle comes in Act 2, Higgins immediately guesses his accent just on the basis of his language, just on the basis of his speech. How different people speak the same language thus reveals a surprising amount about their identity, and in this act we see that language is closely tied with identity because Higgins tells Alfred Doolittle's identity just by his language. From a person's accent, one can determine where the person has come from, same as it happened in this act. The next theme is the theme of language and social class. In this act, we see that language is closely tied with class as well, not only with identity, language is closely tied with class as well. From a person's accent, one can determine what the person's socio-economic background is. Language, accents, and slangs are all simply habits that people learn to associate with different backgrounds and social classes. The wealthier social classes simply claim that theirs is the right way to speak, while this oppresses lower class people. The play shows how this system also opens up possibility for those clever enough people to explore this connection between speech and class. Now, the way Higgins and Pickering have made the plan that they will mold Eliza from a girl who belongs to lower class. They will present her as a duchess just by improving her language, just by improving her accent, and just by improving her speech. So Pickering and Higgins are trying to use this to their advantage, fooling high society by successfully passing Eliza off as a noble lady according to the bet. So this was the theme of language and social class. The next theme that we will see is the theme of appearance and identity. This act, Act 2, explores how social identity is formed not only through patterns of speech but also through one's general appearance. Much like speech, one's physical appearance signals social class, and in this act, even before Eliza's complete transformation, her own father fails to recognize her only because she has changed her clothes, because she has now worn beautiful clothes. And we see in this act that when Eliza comes over here to improve her speech, and when Higgins agrees that he says that he can transform Eliza from a lower working class, from a lower class to a duchess, the first thing that he does is to make her clean, and to he focuses on changing her clothes just to make her associate with elite class. Another example of this theme is the behavior of Eliza's father, as he is introduced in this act. His crude speech and manners, dustman's clothing, poor financial state, and questionable morality are all indicators of his station in life as a happy member of the undeserving poor. He has no use for middle class morals, spending his life touching others for money, and at this point he has never pretended to be other than what he seems. So, this was the theme of appearance and identity. Let's see the other themes. The other theme in Act 2 appears is the theme of social class and manners. As this play is written in 1912, Pygmalion is set in the early 20th century, at the end of the Victorian period in England. Among other things, this period of history was characterized by a particularly rigid social hierarchy, but one that was beginning to decline as social mobility became increasingly possible. The wealthy, high-class characters of the play are thus especially concerned with maintaining class distinctions. This means more than a mere distinction between rich and poor. One's class is formed through performance, learning to act in certain ways. And this was the reason why in this act we see that Mrs. Peirce again and again she was trying to remind Higgins that how to behave in the presence of Eliza, because Higgins has made up his mind that he will transform Eliza from a lower working class girl to a duchess. So this is good manners are very much important to change Eliza's class and to show her uh, to show her a girl that is associated with elite class. That's why Mrs. Peirce was chiding Mr. Higgins um, to improve his manners before Eliza. And again, then we see in this act that when Eliza says that she wants to show off her new look to her old friends, Higgins Higgins stops Eliza to do so by saying that this is against good manners. So we are saying that how manners are associated with social class. Then comes the theme of education and intelligence. Two of the play's main characters, Higgins and Pickering, are academics. Shaw, in some sense, pits their intellectual intelligence against the wits of others, like Eliza. In this act, Eliza is intimidated and confused by Higgins' academic language because she was not able um, to know what Higgins was saying. So she was because she was not educated as well. So she was intimidated and confused by Higgins' language. However, while characters like Eliza, Mrs. Peirce, and Mr. Doolittle lack the kind of education that Higgins and Pickering have had, the play reveals them to be smart in their own ways. Thus, while Higgins and Pickering might appear to be the play's too educated in the plays, or we see in this act that these are the only two educated, intellectual, or intelligent characters, but still different characters exemplify different forms of intelligence and cleverness, as we see um, in the character of Mr. Doolittle, Mr. Alfred Doolittle. Moreover, the play shows some of the downsides of Higgins' overly intellectual learning. Higgins approaches other people with a kind of academic detachment only. He just sees everyone as subjects for his linguistic studies rather than as people with feelings of their own. And we see Higgins in this act that he just insults Eliza and he's not cared about her feelings, and he is just taking Eliza mere as an object for his experiment, or mere as a subject for his studies. Um, he just sees everyone as subjects for his linguistic studies, not only to Eliza, but also when he comes to know about Alfred Doolittle, he has the same opinion regarding him. So one sees this especially with how he treats Eliza. He heartfully neglects her as a person and sees her merely as an object for his experiment. Higgins lacks basic sympathy and empathy, which might be called emotional intelligence. So we see that although he is very much intelligent, but he lacks emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence. The play's most intellectual character is thus in this act we see is leads learned. So this was the theme of education and intelligence. Then comes the theme of transformation. In this act, Higgins, when he tells Pickering in Act 1 that he could teach this creature to speak like a duchess, in this Act 2, it takes a further step when she is given a bath in this act. And in this act, she is cleaning her um, she is cleaned so well that even her own father does not recognize her. So this was the one step of her transformation that is seen in this act when her physical appearance is transformed. So this was the theme of transformation. Then comes the last theme, the last theme of Pygmalion. This act reveals that there is no way Higgins' phonetics magic could do a complete job of changing Eliza on its own. What we see here is that Mrs. Peirce and Colonel Pickering are also informal Pygmalions. Only with Mrs. Peirce, she is working on the girl's appearance and manners, and with Pickering, who is working unknowingly on her self-respect and dignity, just to make Eliza become a whole Duchess package, rather than just a rough-mannered common flower girl who can parrot the speech of a duchess. So this was the theme of Pygmalion. So we have discussed almost all of the themes we have seen appeared in this act. Now, as the third part of this lecture, we will discuss the symbols we found in Act 2, and these symbols are the symbol of the flower shop, which symbolizes Eliza's dream, and then the symbol of clothing, which symbolizes social status and the loss of old identity. Then comes the symbol of mirror. Symbol of mirror. Its mirror actually symbolizes self-awareness and identity. Then in this art we found two characters which are symbolizing something. And the first one is the character of Higgins, which symbolizes Pygmalion, and the second character is of Eliza, and this character symbolizes Galatea. So these are the symbols that we are going to discuss. The first symbol that is going to be discussed is the symbol of a flower shop. So the flower shop symbolizes Eliza's dream. As we know, in the beginning of Act 2, Eliza just comes at Higgins' house and she just says that she has come over here because she wants to take the lectures on speech from Higgins in order to improve her speech. And Higgins just insults her and says her to go away because he's not interested anymore in Eliza because he's done with learning about her accent. So she is of no use to Higgins anymore. So he just insults her to and says her to go away. But Eliza says that she will pay for the lessons. So she tells this to Higgins and Pickering that I want to be a lady in a flower shop. instead of selling at the corner. She further says, "But they won't take me unless I can talk more genteel." So this is the motivation behind it, that Eliza has come over here to take the lessons on speech in order to improve her speech, just to work in a flower shop. So in this way, the flower shop symbolizes Eliza's dream, and it is the dream for which she is willing to pay. It is the dream for which she is willing to transform herself. So this was the symbol of a flower shop. The next symbol that appears in this act is the symbol of clothing. So clothing reflects the social status of Eliza. For example, clothing represents Eliza's metamorphosis from flower girl to a refined lady. When Eliza came for speaking lessons to Higgins' house, she was quite dirty. She was dressed so dirty. But in this act, as a step forward towards her transformation, Higgins' housekeeper, Mrs. Peirce, at the order of Mr. Higgins, he just burns Eliza's old clothes and orders new clothes for her. So this was the burning of Eliza's old clothes symbolizes her old social status. Then Higgins calls Mrs. Peirce and tells her that Mr. Doolittle has come to take Eliza away. Even though Mr. Doolittle denies this, Mrs. Peirce says that Eliza can't leave until her new clothes arrive, since she has burned her old clothes. Here, the destruction of Eliza's old clothes actually symbolizes the loss of her old identity, because she has lost now her old identity, as her new clothes are not yet ready. So she is caught between identities, means that she is not fully transformed yet. She is in the process of that transformation. So this was the symbol of clothing. Then comes the symbol of mirror. In this act, Eliza is given a bath for the first time in memory. And she is so shocked that the procedure requires removing all her clothes. She is even more shocked to find a mirror in the bathroom. She doesn't know which way to look, and finally she hangs a towel over it. However, this represents the moment when Eliza unguardedly sees herself as she is so dirty and far from ladylike in her personal habits. The bath proves to be a treatment, and the positive effects are immediately evident. Now, cloaked in a blue cotton kimono, she emerges looking like a dainty, clean young Japanese lady. Even her own father fails to recognize her at first, and then comments, "Well, I never thought she would clean up as good looking as that, Governor." So Eliza's glimpse in the mirror leaves to her the need for a change. It symbolizes her the need for a change, and the results of the bath prove that change is possible. Thus, the mirror symbolizes self-awareness and identity. In this act, we found two characters who are symbolizing something. Higgins symbolizes Pygmalion and Eliza symbolizes Galatea. Now, as I have already mentioned in the previous lecture, that Pygmalion is a legendary figure of Cyprus in Greek mythology, who was a king and a sculptor. Pygmalion declared that he was not interested in women, and we see in this act that he just says that women ruin everything, and he does not like women and all. But then Pygmalion found his statue was so beautiful and realistic that he fell in love with it, and the name of that statue was Galatea. Now, the creator, Higgins, who is symbolizing Pygmalion, has found his stone Galatea in the person of Eliza, whom he will carve and mold into a great duchess, someone whom he can control and command. So these were the symbols, and in this lecture we have discussed the major themes, the characters, and the symbols that appeared in this act. Thank you very much for listening.